Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books that I review. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got finished reading The Mirror's Truth. This is book 2 of Manifest Delusions by Michael R. Fletcher, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So I really like this one. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. It was enjoyable from start to finish, and I had a really good time reading it. Unfortunately, it was, it did not exceed my expectations, and in fact, it did not meet my expectations. Because of my expectations being so sky high after reading the first book that, I kind of felt like so confident that I would end up giving this 5 stars after what I read, and I truly feel like that first book was one of the best books that I've ever read. Beyond Redemption, just truly fantastic. And I've heard from everybody, literally everybody that has read the second book, at least that I've heard of, have said that they've enjoyed the second one more than the first one. And so I felt so 100% confident that I would end up loving the second one. And I didn't love it. I just liked it, it's one of these moments where I finished this book and I'm looking at it, and I want to take a step back first and say, look, I'm a book reviewer on YouTube, but I'm not a professional book reviewer on YouTube. This is, I have a real job that's not this, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I just happen to like books, and I have a camera, and I like to talk. And so I press record, and then I talk about my thoughts. But I'm not an actual, real reviewer that knows what he's doing. And so when I say that a book is not as good or better, and I've always meant this, I'm just talking about personal opinion. That's all I can talk about because I don't have the knowledge to be able to say what makes a good book good or what makes a bad book bad. Ideally I'm getting better over time and I'm turning into one or turning into an amateur one. But in something like this, I don't know that this was a worse book than the first one from a technical perspective. In fact, I suspect that that people are probably right when they say the second book is better than the first one. I feel like there's so many things about the plot and the pacing and, this beautiful story being told. And beautiful, I have to use subjectively because nothing is beautiful in this book. It's a grimy, dirty, grim dark to its core kind of book. But, beauty in the way that this plot goes and in the way that these characters interact with each other. It's very well done. But the couple things that I loved the most from the first book, me personally, didn't exist in the second book. They just weren't there. And, I'm going to struggle to explain what I think about this without spoiling things. So I will preface this by saying I will be giving very mild spoilers. I don't think spoilers to the point where it would ruin anything for you by any means. But I need to be able to explain what I'm talking about here. And I talked about it in my first review, but the thing that I loved most about the first book was the interaction between what I think is the main 3 characters. There's these 3 bandits that all have, or you suspect they all do, but they all have this mental conditions, and most of the people here are suffer these things called delusions, and it can manifest itself in different ways. I guess that's on my brain. But one of the characters, for example, is a kleptomaniac and cannot help herself from stealing things from everybody, and not to the point of I need the money to go spend. It's literally the act of stealing. She's generous with her money. She gives it to her friends left and right, but she steals from them all the time and then pays for everything. She can't help herself. One of the characters is super narcissistic. But you have these 3 main characters that have these major problems, and they're bandits. They're horrible, horrible people. Everyone in this story, literally everybody in this entire series is rotten to the core. Which is very Abercrombie-like. In fact, Joe Abercrombie is the closest comp I would give for an author to what Michael R. Fletcher is going for here. But the way that these 3 interact with each other is nothing short of fantastic. It reminds me, and I say this with the nicest of ways, and a reference that I feel like most people won't get, but the interactions that I get between the characters in Steven Erikson's The Tales of Botchland and 𝗂𝐿𝐴. It's a novella series about these 2 necromancers and their manservant who go on some ridiculous little adventures, and it's dark, it's funny, and the banter is ingenious. And I feel like it's very similar to the way that these characters interact with each other. And I love the tales of 𝐂𝐮𝐲 and 𝗂𝐴𝐴, and I super love these three, the way they interact. Now, these three characters exist in this book, but they don't interact with each other. They have their own separate storylines that are loosely intertwining with the other characters, but they're doing their own distinct things. And I feel like what we got was I lost that fun to the story. I was left with a very dark story, extremely dark story, which we got in the first. But I love the sweet and sour sort of feeling that we got from the first book, where you had this darkness overlaid with this constant little fun comedic background to it that played off each other so well. And I lost that second part of this story, and I was left with the first. Now, perhaps I would have loved this second one more if I hadn't read the first one. If I went into it with this thought of like, oh, I'm going into this grim, darky story. You know, I get these sort of lovely feelings from things like Second Apocalypse by Scott or Baker, and that's some of my favorite books I've ever read that have no lightheartedness to them at all. It's just dark to its core. But I wanted that other aspect to it. I didn't get it. And you know, and I know that I'm not super popular in my opinion here, because I did a buddy read of this first book with a bunch of people on my Discord, and you know, I kept raving about the way these characters interacted. I kept raving about the comedy here, and people were like, yeah, agreeing with me a little bit. But the things that they found that they loved about the story were very different than the things that I found that I loved in the story. And that's beautiful. You know, I like that we all can read the same thing and kind of have different things that we're taking from it. But so I lost that. And the other thing I lost was another character that I thought was absolutely wonderful, which is this, like this dictator ruler of this little city-state. And he's, you know, at the beginning of the first book, he has created a god, or attempted to create a god, through intense torture and all these negative things to be able to give all these delusions to this person, and they're going to kill this poor little kid eventually and ascend them to godhood, and then he will essentially kind of reign over him. And it's dark, it's horrible, but I loved the character. I thought he was super compelling, and he exists again in this second book, but it's like a super minor backstory that you get, you know, a small fraction of the pages that we got in the first book is what happens in the second book. So those were my two favorite things, and they just weren't here. So what was I left with? Why did I still like this book? This world is great. You know, even the characters, even though they're not interacting with each other, are great. The writing is great. There's so many great things that are going on here that it's hard for me to say anything negative about it, other than, you know, I just like the first one a little bit more. And that's cool. You know, it's still a really, really good book. You know, I feel like, you know, the plot felt like it was rehashing kind of the same themes as it was going along, pretty consistently through it. I feel like the story got dragged out, but I don't mind a story getting dragged out if it's a really good story to be told. It just didn't feel like it was going anywhere with any sort of speed. We were just kind of going over it over and over again. And that works for something like this because I loved it. You know, some of my favorite stories are, you know, 1,500, 2,000 page, just chonkers of a story. Now, this is not what this is. This is in the 500 page realm. So it certainly didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome by any means. And it was better than the first book in the ending. I feel like the first book ended, and even though I was satisfied by it, essentially it was saying, you know, and stay tuned next time for book 2. And I feel like what this book did was it said, and we are now wrapped up a very solid story. And there is clearly another book to be told. We have to get another book to figure out what's going on here. I'm surprised that there's only one more book, quite frankly, because it feels like there's a lot more that needs to be done. And either, you know, it's going to speed way too fast and be rushed, or the story is going to go in some unexpected turns that I did not see coming that make it understandably quicker paced and get to the ending that I don't see coming. And I would love it to be that second thing, you know? But I feel like it had an explosive ending. It had a wonderful, I can't say anything more than that, but the ending was great, right? And it had so many things kind of coming together that just worked great. And it had this, you know, a ending that I will never forget with, you know, it was drama filled. It was a tearjerker. It made you happy and sad and have all these great conflicting feelings going on at the same time. And I couldn't pull my eyes off it. In fact, you know, I was getting towards the end of this book earlier today. And there was like a major scene happening, and I had like an important thing to do that I was like, I'm going to just push that off. I can't do that important thing because I have something way more important to be getting done here and figuring out where this story goes. I will be late. That is not a problem. So yeah, that happened. And I'm, you know, not afraid to admit it. Sometimes my book reading gets in place of other important things in my life, which is totally good. But so yeah, you know, in general, this series is awesome. You need to check this out. You're probably going to like the second book more than the first one, unlike me. And I hope you do, you know. And now my worry here is going into the third book. You know, as I heard from everybody that the second book is better than the first, I also heard that the third is the worst of the bunch. Now, I am a contrarian a lot of the time. And before I went into the second book, I kind of felt like, oh man, I'm going to love the second one and I'm not going to love the third one. Well, you know, I didn't love the second one as much as the first. So maybe I will like the third. Maybe the third's going to be my favorite. And I have more hope for that now, because maybe the things that I want are going to be there, you know, and so I can just be all over the board, right? I would love to be wrong. I would love to have that contrarian perspective and go into the third one and say the thing that nobody says and that it's the best one of the bunch. So hopefully that is the case. We'll find out, ideally sooner rather than later, because I really want to find out where the story goes. And I know I have a huge backlog. You know, it takes me months to get to the next books in the series, but ideally I cut that short a little bit and I can get to this one sometime in the next 2 or 3 months. So my brain's fresh on it and I can just go to it with all that eagerness that I feel like I have right now. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching this review. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Amy, Alex P, Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Daniel O, JD, Jerry, Jonathan, Josh, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗶𝗶𝐲, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Slay, Tahir, Wyatt, Anna, Blair, Bevan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Marcus, Michael Sugarman, and Sky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.